macro, FRQ number 2, this T-Accounts. Reserve ratio is 10%. What is the dollar value of new loans that First Superior Bank can make? Recognize they're being a little bit tricky with this question in that if somebody puts $2,000 in the bank and our RRR is 10%, that implies that required reserves, 10% of 2,000 would be 200, so that would have to go into our required reserves. Everything else would flow into excess reserves. Now, that would be 1,800, but this bank has already loaned out $1,800. So in excess reserves is 0, and we would explain simply that the dollar value of excess reserves, we could just say is 0, as this bank is fully loaned out. It has no excess reserves to loan out because it's already loaned them all out. Tricky. Anytime you see the word reserves, understand that there are required in there and there are excess in there. And stop for just a second and make sure they're not trying to trick you. Be a little paranoid. These T accounts are always tricky, almost as if somebody's doesn't like kids. All right, Mr. Smith deposits 100 of cash in the demand deposits in First Superior Bank. Calculate the maximum amount of new loans that First Superior Bank can make. So, Mr. Smith does $100 in the demand deposits. Required reserves. Now we know our RRR is 10%. So out of $100, 10% is obviously $10. Would go in required reserves. The rest would flow into excess reserves, or $90. So this bank, the maximum amount of new loan that this bank can make is $90. Easy enough. C, as a result of the $100 cash deposit, calculate the maximum change over time in each of the following. Let's do demand deposits first, and just recognize that finding the maximum change over time of demand deposits, you're always just going to take that original demand deposit and multiply it by your multiplier. Now here our multiplier is, we find it by doing 1 over the RRR. In this case, it's 1 over 0.1, or 10%. A dime goes into a dollar 10 times. Our multiplier is 10 here. So that would be $1,000. Do recognize that, let's come back to do loans in just a second. Let's look at D. As a result of Mr. Smith's $100 cash deposit, calculate the maximum change over time in the money supply. This tends to be the sort of order that we usually do these, is we'll figure out how much this bank can loan out, then we talk about the money supply, and then we talk about demand deposits. So let's just jump out of order a little bit here. The money supply, we know this bank can loan out $90. We'll multiply that by our multiplier again, which is 10, and that gives us what's going to happen to the money supply. The money supply would increase by $900. Now, recognize that the way we come up with that number is sort of this bank's creation of money. The way banks create money is they loan out the excess reserves that they have, and that creates money. So this guy Mr. Smith puts $100 in the bank, 10 stays in required reserves, $90 goes into excess reserves. This bank would then loan out that $90. It would go into, obviously, a demand deposit in another bank. Required reserves are still 10%, so $9 would go into required reserves, and then excess reserves would have $81 flow into it. That $81 would get loaned, tricky, would get loaned out, and it would go to another bank, and that $81 would go in there, and then required reserves would be 10%. So $8.10 would be kept in required reserves, and the rest would go into excess reserves. Don't test my math. I can't do it that far. But that's the idea of the bank's expansionary creation of money, is they would loan out this, and then this would loan out, and then it would go on and on, et cetera, et cetera. If you added them all up, they would be $900 increases in the money supply. But recognize that these are being loaned out, right? that $90 being loaned out there, then it becomes $81 here and it's loaned out there, etc., etc. That increase in the money supply are also loans. So this is going to be 900 also dollars. Tricky, right? Whereas they're asking about the money supply here, and this is how we're used to it, but obviously these have to be loaned out to increase the money supply. So loans here would be $900. Just recognize that the money supply increase and loans are really the same thing going on. We could have also called them new demand deposits if we wanted to, something like that. Because, well, maybe we don't want to get into that. As a result, we answered that one. E, provide one reason why the actual change in the money supply can be smaller than the maximum change you identified in part D. So why would the money supply ever be less than $900? Well, think about that. The first reason that we would want to probably use if they ever ask us for one, we could probably do more than one. But the first reason we would always say is, what if banks don't loan out all of their excess reserves? So if they don't loan out all of those excess reserves, think about that. What if instead of $90 here, they only loaned out 10? Well, then obviously the money supply would not have hit 10,900. It would have just been 10 by 10. It would have just gone up by 100. So if banks don't loan out all of those excess reserves, you can't hit that $900 number. The second reason, if you ever had to have a second reason, what if people don't redeposit? If they don't redeposit their loan, think about that, right? If I take out a $90 loan from First Superior Bank, but then I just take the money home and stick it into a jar, if I don't redeposit that money into another bank, you can't get that money expansion, right? If I don't take that $90 and put it in another bank so that that bank can loan out the 81, and then they don't take that 81 and put it in another bank and loan it out, etc., etc., you would not get the same expansion that you would have if we just assume that all of this money gets loaned out. So I would use this one first. Banks don't loan out all excess reserves. That's pretty straightforward, and that's the answer they're going to be looking for. But this one also works. People don't redeposit loans. A third way that you could think about it, not that we need to or want to, is just that what if people don't come and take out loans? If no one comes and takes out a loan, then you can't have money expansion at all, right? If no one takes out loans, that can't happen either. All right. Be safe. Take care. Bye.